They thought the house would silence me, tuck me away like a piece of old furniture. But Edward knew better. He didn't build me a refuge. He left me a weapon, a life designed to remind me that my silence was the only thing ever keeping them in power. My name is Clarissa Morgan. I am 63 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I buried my husband of 38 years, Edward. Edward and I built this house together from the ground up. Every inch of this place carries the memories of a life we crafted with care and love. The front porch where we watched thunderstorms roll in, the kitchen where we spent late nights sipping tea and discussing everything from politics to which flowers to plant in the backyard come spring. This house is not a structure of bricks and wood. It is a living archive of our shared life. Every wall echoes with laughter. Every window reflects moments that once were. That quiet Tuesday morning, with funeral flowers still wilting in their vases, the phone rang. I knew before I picked it up that it would not be a condolence call. The timing was too sharp, too strategic. "Mom, we need to talk about the house," my son Brian said, his voice devoid of preamble. His tone was firm, clipped, and efficient. It was the same tone he had used in his college years when he needed money to cover expenses. He never quite explained. Only this time, he wasn't asking. He was telling. I stood in my kitchen, the coffee in my world's best grandma mug untouched and cooling rapidly. Catherine, my granddaughter, had given me that mug. She had painted it herself at one of those pottery studios when she was 10. It had always been my favorite, a tangible reminder of summers spent baking cookies and planting tomato seedlings together. But now, even this cherished object felt alien. The person holding it was no longer the woman I remembered being. When I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, I hardly recognized the face looking back. The woman staring at me had hair that had thinned and grayed faster in the past 3 weeks than it had in years. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders hunched, her presence diminished as though grief had physically shrunk her. But as Brian's words unraveled, as his true intentions seeped through the thin veil of concern, I felt something stir deep within me. It wasn't anger at first. It was something quieter. A click, a shift, the gentle but undeniable realization that I had become a transaction to my children. Their kindness was a strategy, not an act of love. It was a calculated approach to gain control over what they presumed would become their asset. At that moment, something inside me did not break. It woke up. This is not a revenge story. It is a story about reclaiming your voice when the world has grown used to your silence. It is about honoring the life you built, even when your children treat it as disposable. It is about what happened when Brian and Danielle decided my future for me and what I did instead. Brian's next call came the following morning. His tone was laced with a professional brightness, the kind used in conference calls when trying to close a deal. He informed me that he and Danielle had dinner the previous night, a strategy meeting masquerading as family bonding. They had come to a conclusion. My current situation was unsustainable. The house was too large, the upkeep too demanding, my finances too strained. It was time, he said, to think about next steps. As he spoke, I stood at the kitchen window, staring at the herb garden Edward and I had once tended with such care. It had grown wild since the funeral, rosemary, and time spilling over the borders as if nature itself had decided to rebel against order. "There is no mortgage," I said flatly, cutting through his rehearsed script. There was a pause, a calculated silence, then Brian's laugh, sharp and dismissive, eerily reminiscent of his father's. Only Edward had always used that laugh with warmth. Brian's version held no affection. "Mom, you don't need to pretend. Dad's pension can't cover all your medications. We're worried," he said, his words polished with faux empathy. But they weren't worried. They were circling. He pivoted swiftly into a pitch, speaking about real estate markets, cash buyers, and how the proceeds from selling my home could be a win-win. A win for them, a loss for me. I asked him, and where would I go? He responded with manufactured enthusiasm. Danielle's finished basement. I would have my entrance, my bathroom. It would be cozy, he said, as if stripping away my independence and privacy was a generous offer. He tried to package this demotion as an upgrade, oblivious to the humiliation embedded in every word. I reminded him that Danielle's basement floods every spring. He countered, saying it had been fixed. He mentioned how Catherine would keep me company during her college breaks, as though my granddaughter's sporadic visits were a salve for displacement. He spoke of meals, of how Danielle struggled with cooking, hinting that I could be of help, not realizing or perhaps not caring that he was reducing me to a live-in convenience. Brian's voice droned on about logistics, while my mind drifted to last Thanksgiving. I remembered sitting alone in that basement, balancing a plate of food on my lap while the rest of the family dined upstairs, their laughter muffled by the floorboards. I remembered how Danielle never called after Edward's funeral, not even once. That evening, my phone buzzed again. A message from Danielle. "Mom, Brian told me about the house. I know it's hard, but it's for the best. Catherine's so excited to have Grandma living closer. Can't wait to talk details." Details. As if my grief was an event to be scheduled, as if the life I had built over nearly 4 decades could be wrapped up in bullet points and calendar invites. I reread her message until the words blurred. Catherine, who hadn't called or messaged me in months, was allegedly excited. The same Catherine who used to spend her summers by my side is now silent since Christmas. I scrolled through our last exchange, a group text from December 15th, thanking everyone for holiday gifts. There had been no personal message, no inquiry into my well-being, no condolences after Edward's passing. If she was excited, she hadn't shared it with me. Danielle's offer wasn't rooted in care. It was about convenience, a tidy solution to ease her conscience while ensuring I remained useful, out of sight but within reach. That night, as untouched casserole dishes cluttered my kitchen table and unopened condolence cards gathered dust, I said the words out loud for the first time. I am not a burden. I am not invisible. And in that moment, I knew I was done pretending otherwise. The morning after Danielle's message, the house felt colder, emptier, as though the walls themselves had started to retreat, pulling away from me, bracing for an inevitable goodbye they hadn't agreed to. I sat in Edward's armchair, the one by the fireplace where he used to read his detective novels, and I stared at the phone resting on the coffee table. The silence that had once felt oppressive now felt like a shield. But I knew it wouldn't last. Brian had always been the persistent one. As children, both he and Danielle had been ambitious, but where Danielle masked her ambitions under a veneer of politeness, Brian wore his like a badge of honor. He called again that morning. His tone was sharper, less rehearsed, a hint of frustration seeping through his carefully chosen words. "Mom, I need you to understand that we're trying to help you," he began. "Danielle and I have talked about this extensively. It's not safe for you to live alone in that big house. The maintenance alone is too much. You deserve to be somewhere comfortable, somewhere manageable." Manageable. The word grated against me like sandpaper. Manageable for whom? "Brian, I appreciate your concern," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I'm not ready to leave this house." There was a pause, and then a sigh that felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced it in front of a mirror. "Mom, this isn't about readiness. It's about reality." He launched into numbers. Property values. Market trends. The potential return on investment. His words blurred into a monotone hum as I looked around the living room, my gaze landing on the collection of photo frames on the mantelpiece. Family vacations. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. Memories that didn't fit into a spreadsheet. "We already have a buyer lined up," Brian continued. "Gregory's client is serious. A cash offer, quick close. We could wrap this up in a month. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." His efficiency was suffocating. "Brian," I interrupted, "where exactly did you tell Gregory this money would go?" Another pause, longer this time. "What do you mean?" "I mean, did you and Danielle already decide how to split the proceeds? Did you factor in imaginary debts, maintenance costs that don't exist?" His silence was louder than any answer he could have given. "I thought so," I said, my voice firmer now. "You assumed I was struggling. You assumed I needed rescuing. But you never asked me." He tried to pivot, but his words lacked the previous conviction. "Look, I admit we moved too fast. Maybe we should have had this conversation sooner. But this is an opportunity, Mom. You don't have to move into Danielle's basement. We'll find you a nice apartment, something modern, accessible." I could almost hear the mental checklist ticking in his mind, reducing my life to square footage and elevator access. "Brian," I said, "I am not a project. I am not an asset to be managed." He started to protest, but I ended the call. My hands trembled slightly as I placed the phone back on the table, but it wasn't fear. It was clear. That evening, as dusk settled over the neighborhood, my phone buzzed with another message. This time it was Danielle. Mom, we're not trying to upset you. We're worried. Let's talk calmly. Maybe over dinner. A dinner. A negotiation disguised as a family gathering. I could already picture the scene. Polite smiles, veiled suggestions, Danielle's husband chiming in about how practical it would be, how they could help ease my burden. But the burden wasn't the house. The burden was their unwillingness to see me as anything other than an aging woman in need of supervision. That night, sleep eluded me. I walked through the house, running my fingers along the walls, tracing the grooves Edward had carved into the staircase when he insisted on doing the banisters himself. Every room whispered stories they had long forgotten, but I remembered vividly. In the study, I found Edward's old navy blue folder tucked beneath tax documents. I had almost missed it. It was heavier than I anticipated. Inside were bank statements, investment summaries, and most surprisingly, a deed to a property in Spain. Marbella. It was a place Edward had mentioned only once, flipping through a travel magazine. He had pointed to a picture of a villa by the sea and said, "One day, Clarissa, when no one needs anything from us, we'll go." At the time, I had laughed, dismissing it as a distant dream. But Edward hadn't been dreaming. He had been planning. There were photographs, too. A whitewashed villa with blue shutters, a terrace overlooking the sea, a garden lined with lemon trees. And on the back of one photograph, in Edward's familiar handwriting, were the words, "A place where no one needs anything from us. Just peace." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope with my name on it, the seal untouched. The letter inside was dated exactly 30 days after his passing. "My dearest Clarissa, if you are reading this, then the silence I tried to spare you from has arrived. I know our children. I love them, but I know them. And I suspect they are already circling like vultures, convinced they know what's best for you. They don't. You are not fragile. You are not to be managed. Everything we saved, everything we built, it's yours. Not to protect, not to defend, to live. Go to the house. See the world we dreamed of. Choose yourself. And when you sit on that terrace with the sea in front of you, know that I always believed in your strength. Love, Edward." I read the letter 3 times. Each word chipped away at the fog that had clouded my mind since Edward's passing. By the time I folded the letter and placed it in my purse, I knew what I had to do. 2 days later, I sat across from Connie West, Edward's estate attorney. Connie had been a fixture in our lives for years. Her office smelled of leather and old paper, a comforting familiarity in a world that had begun to feel alien. "Miss Morgan," Connie began, unfolding documents between us, "your husband was meticulous. He left nothing to chance." I nodded, Edward's letter burning a quiet resolve in my purse. "He created a revocable trust in your name. All assets, this home, the investment accounts, the Spanish property, are yours alone. Your children were never named as beneficiaries. Only the life insurance policy goes to them." I exhaled slowly. Edward had seen what I refused to admit. Connie slid a second envelope across the desk. "He also opened a separate account last year. Deposited a portion of his pension each month. He called it your independence fund. There's $50,000 in it." My throat tightened. He said it was for when Clarissa finally lives for herself. I couldn't speak. The lump in my throat was too large. "And the property in Spain?" I asked. "Fully paid off. You have legal ownership." He even hired a local property manager. "The house is in excellent condition. You can move in tomorrow if you'd like." Tomorrow. The word felt surreal. All these years, my future had been plotted by others. Now it was mine to decide. "Do you want me to draw up the documents to reaffirm your ownership?" Connie asked. I met her gaze, my voice unwavering. "Yes. It's time." The moving truck arrived at 7 a.m. sharp as Brian's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the upstairs window as he stepped out, clutching a thick manila folder. He hadn't even knocked when the movers began loading boxes. I met him at the door, wearing the red dress Edward had always loved. "Mom, what is going on?" he demanded. "Good morning, Brian," I said calmly. "I'm having some things moved." He brushed past me, scanning the hallway. "These are mine," he said, pointing at label boxes. My childhood things. Why are you packing them? Because I thought you'd want them, I said. Memories are precious, and I won't be needing them where I'm going. His brows furrowed. You're not serious. You haven't even signed the sale documents yet. Gregory's client is expecting an answer by noon. Brian, did you ever ask me if I wanted to sell this house? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I didn't flinch. Brian, I am not your obligation. I am not your project. I have a life. And now, I have a home waiting for me across the ocean. His phone buzzed. It was Danielle. Mom, what is this insanity? She demanded, her voice sharp through the speaker. There's a moving truck at my house. They're trying to deliver that old piano. The one you begged for when you were 8. I asked. I thought you'd want it. I don't want the piano, she snapped. And Brian said you're not going through with the house sale. That's correct, I said calmly. Her voice cracked. But you can't afford. I can afford more than you ever gave me credit for. Silence. Mom, what's happening? I'm leaving, I said. But not for your basement. That evening, I booked a one-way ticket to Spain. The morning of my flight to Spain arrived quietly, with none of the fanfare that had marked the milestones of my life orchestrated by others. No family members were driving me to the airport. No last-minute advice about travel documents. No suggestions about what to pack or not to pack. It was just me, standing in the early dawn light, clutching the worn leather suitcase Edward had once used on his business trips. The same suitcase he'd promised we'd someday use for adventures, not obligations. The taxi driver, a soft-spoken man named Victor, greeted me with a polite nod. He didn't ask about my destination beyond the airport. I appreciated his silence more than he could know. At the airport, everything moved in mechanical rhythm. Lines formed, announcements echoed, the world buzzed around me, unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding within. When the gate attendant called for boarding, I took my seat by the window, Edward's favorite spot, and let the hum of the engines drown out the remnants of voices that had tried to dictate my life. As the plane lifted off, the house, the neighborhood, the memories faded into a quilt of landscapes stitched together by distance. I didn't look back. I wasn't running away. I was running toward. The flight was long, but I didn't sleep. I watched the Atlantic shimmer beneath us, a vast expanse of promise. I imagined Edward beside me, his hand resting gently over mine, whispering about the tapas bars we'd visit, the narrow cobbled streets we'd get lost in. The thought didn't make me cry. It made me smile. When we landed in Madrid, I navigated customs with a newfound steadiness. The officer, a young man with kind eyes, asked, "Purpose of visit?" "Starting over," I replied. He smiled and stamped my passport without another question. Outside, a woman stood holding a sign with my name, Pilar Rodriguez. The caretaker Edward had arranged long before I knew I'd need her. She was older than I had imagined, with silver-streaked hair pulled back into a neat bun, her face lined with years of sun and kindness. "Senora Clarissa," she greeted me, wrapping me in a hug that felt like a homecoming. "Your husband spoke of you often. He was proud of this house. He said it would be where his Clarissa finds her rhythm." Her words were a balm. As we drove through the winding roads of Marbella, Pilar pointed out landmarks, the old church with its bell tower that marked the center of town, the olive groves that turned golden under the afternoon sun, the cliffs that kissed the sea with a quiet defiance. When we arrived, the villa stood bathed in soft sunlight, its whitewashed walls glowing, the blue shutters open to let in the sea breeze. Bougainvillea vines cascaded over the front gate, a riot of fuchsia against the pristine facade. The garden was exactly as Edward's photographs had promised. Lemon trees standing sentinel along the path, their branches heavy with fruit, the terrace overlooking a stretch of Mediterranean blue, so vivid it seemed to pulse with life. Pilar handed me a brass key. "He left this for you. Said it was a symbol, not just a key. A symbol that this house is yours and yours alone." Inside, the house was simple, yet every detail felt deliberate. Terracotta tiles cooled my bare feet. Wooden beams framed the ceilings, and arched windows let in the golden Spanish sun. It was a house untouched by the clutter of expectations, free from the noise of obligations. There were no reminders of who I was supposed to be, only space to become who I wanted to be. Pilar showed me the pantry, stocked with essentials: fresh bread, olive oil, cheese and wine. Rest now, Senora. Tomorrow we walk. Marbella is best met slowly. That evening, I stood on the terrace, a glass of wine in hand, watching the sun sink into the horizon. The sea below whispered in a language I didn't yet understand, but I knew it was speaking to me. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt not invisible, but profoundly seen. Over the next few days, life unfolded gently. Pilar became both guide and friend, introducing me to the rhythm of the town. Mornings began with a stroll to the bakery where the owner, Miguel, greeted me with a smile and a loaf of pan de pueblo. The local cafe became my afternoon sanctuary, where an espresso and a book replaced the endless to-do lists that once defined my existence. I didn't check emails. I ignored the calls that flickered on my phone screen. The world I had left behind continued spinning, but it no longer dictated my pace. On the fourth evening, just as the sky turned a deep indigo, my phone buzzed. For a moment, I considered silencing it, but then I saw the name, Catherine. It had been months since my granddaughter had reached out. Her name felt like a relic of another life. I answered on the fourth ring. "Grandma," she said, her voice laced with urgency and something else, shame. "I've been trying to reach you. Mom told me about the house. I just found out about everything. About the college fund. You've been helping all this time, and no one told me." The heaviness in her voice was not rehearsed. It was real, raw. "I didn't do it for credit, Catherine," I said softly. "I did it because I love you." "I should have called," she said, her voice cracking. "I let them convince me you needed space. But I was just being selfish. I didn't want to see what was happening." The silence between us was thick but not suffocating. "Grandma, can I come see you?" she asked. "Spring break is in 3 weeks. I was supposed to go to Cancun, but I want to see you. I want to see the house Grandpa chose for you. I want to see you." My heart swelled, not with regret, but with hope. "Yes, Catherine," I whispered. "Come." 3 weeks later, I stood at Malaga Airport, scanning the crowd until I saw her. Catherine was not the polished figure from holiday photos. She wore worn jeans, a plain white t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked around, her eyes searching until they landed on me. "Grandma," she called, her voice cracking with emotion as she rushed into my arms. Her embrace wasn't polite. It wasn't obligatory. It was real. It was everything. "You look amazing," she said, stepping back. "Did you cut your hair?" "Just a trim." Pilar insisted. During the drive back, she pressed her face against the car window like a child, marveling at every village, every stretch of sea, every olive grove. When we pulled into the driveway, she went still. "He knew, didn't he?" she asked. "Grandpa knew you'd need this place." That evening, we dined on the terrace, Pilar's homemade paella filling the air with warmth. The waves below provided a steady, grounding rhythm. "Tell me everything," Catherine said. "Not just about the house. About you." And so I did. 4 hours I spoke, not as a grandmother imparting lessons, but as a woman sharing stories. Stories of a life lived for others, of sacrifices made in the name of duty, of the quiet rediscovery of self. Catherine listened, not out of obligation, but out of genuine interest. She asked questions, laughed at my awkward Spanish phrases, and cried when I recounted the moment I found Edward's letter. By the end of the week, as we sat on the beach with our feet buried in the sand, Catherine made a confession. "Grandma," she said, "I don't want to go back. Not yet. I don't want to return to pretending. Can I stay?" I looked at her, this young woman who was not just my granddaughter but had become my friend, my mirror, and I smiled. "Then stay," I said. "We'll figure it out together. Because home isn't built on guilt, on inheritance, on obligation. Home is built on presence, on honesty, on love that asks for nothing but gives everything." The days with Catherine unfolded like chapters of a book I thought I'd misplaced. Each morning, we created new routines that didn't feel forced. We'd take long walks along the cliffs, sharing stories that had gathered dust in the corners of our memories. She told me about her college struggles, about the pressure to be perfect in a world curated through social media, about feeling invisible even in rooms filled with people. I listened, not as a mentor, but as someone who understood. One afternoon, while we were tending to the garden, Catherine discovered Edward's old camera stored in the attic. Its leather strap had cracked with age, but the lens was still clear. She spent hours wandering through the villa, capturing moments that weren't staged but simply existed. The way the light hit the terracotta tiles, the curve of the ironwork on the balcony, the quiet dignity of the lemon trees. She showed me the photos one evening as we sat by the fireplace. They were more than images, they were affirmations. A visual love letter to a life that had been overlooked by those too busy managing appearances. But as serene as those days were, reality's shadow wasn't far behind. On the 7th morning, Pilar entered the kitchen with a concerned expression. "Señora Clarissa, there's a man at the gate. He says he's your son." I felt my stomach tighten. Catherine looked up from her coffee, her face pale. "Do you want me to talk to him?" she offered. "No, darling," I said, straightening my shoulders. "This is mine to face." Brian stood outside the wrought iron gate, dressed in casual slacks that felt more like armor than comfort. His sunglasses hid his eyes, but not the tension in his posture. He had not come out of love. He had come to reclaim control. "Mom," he began as I approached. "We need to talk." "I can hear you fine from here, Brian." He glanced around, as if the walls and lemon trees were adversaries conspiring against him. "Why are you doing this? You've disappeared. You've shut us out. Danielle's worried sick. Catherine's vanished too." "I haven't disappeared, Brian. I've relocated. There's a difference." He exhaled sharply, dropping the charm mask. "You can't just run away. We need to resolve the house situation. Gregory's buyer is still interested, but they're getting impatient." "You're confusing need with want again," I said evenly. He stepped closer to the gate. "Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Danielle's stressed, Catherine's education isn't cheap, and you're sitting on a property that could solve everything." "I see. So this isn't about my well-being. It's about liquidity." He shifted, unprepared for my clarity. "Brian," I continued, "Edward left everything in order. The house in Ohio isn't for sale. My affairs are not up for negotiation. And Catherine's education is already taken care of." The air between us thickened. He realized the scripts of manipulation were no longer working. "You're choosing this over your family?" he asked, the last line of his arsenal. "I'm choosing this because it's the first decision I'm making for myself in decades," I said. "That's not abandonment. That's reclamation." Catherine appeared then, standing a few feet behind me. She said nothing, but her presence was a statement. Brian's jaw tightened. He knew he had lost, but surrender was not in his vocabulary. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice cold. "I already regret not doing it sooner." With no more ground to stand on, he turned and left. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Catherine and I sat on the terrace. The confrontation had not shattered the peace. If anything, it had fortified it. "Grandma," Catherine said softly, "I'm proud of you." I smiled, feeling the weight of unspoken years lift from my chest. The following week, letters began arriving. Legal notices, sale proposals, veiled threats dressed in formal language. Gregory's offers became more desperate, Danielle's messages turned performative, and Brian's attempts at guilt morphed into cold silence. But none of it touched me. The villa, the life Edward had envisioned, had become my sanctuary. Catherine's presence was my affirmation. One morning, Pilar handed me an envelope with no return address. Inside was a legal document revoking any claim my children could have tried to assert over my assets. Attached was a note from Connie West, Edward's trusted attorney. He anticipated every move they would make. "The house is safe. You are safe. Live freely, Clarissa." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beneath Edward's favorite photograph of us. Weeks passed, and Marbella embraced us as its own. Catherine started volunteering at a local art studio, teaching photography to children. I continued writing, my memoir now blossoming into chapters filled not with sorrow, but with quiet victories. Yet, beneath the calm, a question lingered. Would this peace last, or would another storm rise? The world I had left behind was not known for letting go quietly. Then, one crisp morning, a package arrived at the villa. No sender. No note. Inside was a single item. Edward's old journal. I hadn't seen it in years. I flipped through the pages, his handwriting still as deliberate as ever. Between sketches of architectural designs and snippets of poems, I found a folded letter addressed to me. Clarissa, if you're reading this, you've already found your strength. But strength needs reminders. This house was never just an escape. It was a beginning. A place where you'd remember that your story is not defined by what you give to others, but by what you claim for yourself. Trust the house. It will guide you. I looked out at the terrace, the sea beyond, and understood. Edward had not just given me a home. He had given me a compass. That night, as Catherine and I sat by the fire, I told her about the journal. So what now, Grandma? She asked, her eyes reflecting both curiosity and trust. I smiled, feeling the next chapter unfolding, yet not fully revealed. Now we wait and see what the house has planned for us. And as the wind whispered through the lemon trees and the waves crashed with deliberate rhythm, I knew the story was far from over. Because some choices, even when made, continue to echo long after.